Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. A strict ruling from the judge admits verdict watch in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial.
I have instructed that no one from MSNBC News will be permitted in this building for the duration of this trial.
And the death of Ahmaud Arbery trial.
I just killed a man. I had blood on me still. It was the most traumatic event of my life.
Defendant Travis McMichael is back on the stand for intense cross-examination. Plus, an exoneration decades in the making. 2 men are now cleared in the assassination of civil rights leader Malcolm X. High-profile attorney Gloria Allred takes on the deadly Rush shooting, accusing actor Alec Baldwin of playing Russian. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. Thursday marked day 3 of verdict watch in the contentious case of Kyle Rittenhouse. As the jury continued deliberation, the judge banned a media organization from the courthouse after an accusation that a reporter followed a bus carrying jurors. Our Anjanette Levy is live outside the Kenosha County House. Anjanette, what can you tell us about the judge's ruling?
Brian, this is a big deal. Word spread quickly throughout the courthouse here on day 3 of deliberations that someone in the media was being accused of following jurors. Judge Bruce Schroeder called both the prosecution and the defense and Kyle Rittenhouse into the courtroom and explained that he was banning MSNBC from the courthouse after police stopped a man on Wednesday working for them who was following the bus carrying jurors.
A person who identified himself as James J. Morrison and who claimed that he was a producer with NBC News, employed for MSNBC under the supervision of someone named Irene Bayan in New York for MSNBC. The police, when they stopped him because he was following at a distance of about a block and went through a red light, pulled him over and inquired of him what was going on, and he gave that information and stated that he had been instructed by Ms. Bayan in New York to follow the jury bus. I have instructed that no one from MSNBC News will be permitted in this building for the duration of this trial. This is a very serious matter, and I don't know what the ultimate truth of it is. But absolutely, it would go without much thinking that someone who is following the jury bus, that is it's extremely serious matter.
I contacted NBC News, and a spokesperson sent the following statement. It reads, last night, and that was Wednesday night, a freelancer received a traffic citation. While the traffic violation took place near the jury van, the freelancer never contacted or intended to contact the jurors during deliberations and never photographed or intended to photograph them. We regret the incident and will fully cooperate with the authorities on any investigation. And that investigation is underway and ongoing, according to Kenosha Police and Judge Schroeder. Now, meanwhile, as you can probably hear, there are still protesters and supporters of Kyle Rittenhouse who have gathered here outside the courthouse as the jury continues to deliberate.
They chased him, and he did not intentionally came here to kill nobody. He was actually standing to protect the neighborhood. That was his purpose. I hung with a lot of people that stood there with rifles just to protect the neighborhood. We have the right to bear arms. I'm a constitutionalist. He's a constitutionalist.
He's a vigilante. We don't think vigilantes have the right to self-defense. He killed anti-racist protesters who were out protesting against police terrorism.
Now, things have actually been peaceful during day 3 of deliberations here at the courthouse following a fight here on Wednesday. Someone threw a punch on the courthouse steps, hitting a photographer. Then things moved into the street where Kenosha County Sheriff's deputies and police officers took 2 people into custody. A man and a woman were loaded into a police van. Both faced charges including disorderly conduct. Now today, among all of the yelling from supporters of Kyle Rittenhouse and protesters, there was actually a pretty nice moment thanks to Kenosha County Sheriff. Take a look at this. Sheriff Dave Beth brought cookies and coffee outside and set up tables at the courthouse, and everybody was welcome to have a cup of coffee and a cookie. He called them cookies for peace. Protesters and even Kyle Rittenhouse supporters ate some of the cookies, had some coffee. Sheriff Beth talked with us about why he bought the cookies.
About 5 years ago, we had another protest in front of the safety building. I brought out carrot cakes to everybody, and it was amazing how it kind of calmed everybody down. And our ultimate goal is to show everybody we're on the same page, to whether we voice our opinion or we're here together, and we're here to do it hopefully peacefully.
And who doesn't like cookies and coffee? It brought people together, at least for a couple of minutes. And Sheriff Beth said he does not expect a lot of trouble here following a verdict. If a verdict is reached, he said that's according to the intelligence reports he's receiving. Brian?
Thanks, Antoinette. Joining us now is co-host Terry Austin and criminal defense attorney Taylor Koss. Taylor, as the hours of deliberation continue, what do you think is giving the jury pause in coming to a verdict?
So, Brian, thanks for having me, by the way. Look, they're into it now. As you know, they're deliberating for well over 22 hours. And what's happening, trying to interpret what the jury's doing is like reading tea leaves. It's one of the things that attorneys always try to do, and it's really hard to put a finger on it. But when they're so deep into it now, 20 plus hours in, one might think that it's starting to become a little bit more about the jurors' personalities and maybe less about the evidence. So what I mean by this is after 25 hours of deliberations, people are, firm in their beliefs. They have divided into teams in the jury. We don't know the sides, we don't know the numbers, but there are people that are in support of a guilty verdict and there are people who are against it. And really, it comes down to a battle of attrition now. Who is firmer in their beliefs and who's willing to play the long game?
All right, we'll see how that goes. Terry, Judge Schroeder has already expressed his concern about the media after this incident with MSNBC. Do you think he will exclude the media in future trials?
He might just do that, Brian. He was very concerned with what happened with this MSNBC reporter. He said it was very serious. And now, in addition to his concerns about fairness to the defendants, his concerns about the fairness to the parties, he was concerned about criticism about how he was running the courtroom. In addition to all that, now he has to be concerned about the safety and the anonymity of those jurors. And he was right to make the statement that he made, and he was right to say he's going to take this up to the highest level. So I think a good decision on his part.
Now, Anjanette, what was the reaction of the media both inside and outside the courtroom after hearing MSNBC was excluded from the court?
Well, when this first, word about this first started spreading, we know that the media coordinator was with a deputy, and the judge said, find MSNBC and NBC. And so we all thought, oh my goodness, we hope something really awful didn't happen where everybody is kind of tossed out of here, or at least the cameras. If he was going to exclude the media, he would have to hold some type of hearing on that, and the media would be able to argue against it. But once we found out what had happened, I don't think anybody was surprised. Judge Schroeder is open to the media being in the courtroom, but we've been told if you break the rules, you're out.
Makes sense, and probably a good ruling based on how that information came about that reporter following that group of jurors. Thank you, everyone. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, decades after a wrongful conviction, 2 men are exonerated in the assassination of Malcolm X. But first, it was the video that shocked the nation. An unarmed black jogger, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, gunned down in broad daylight. The 3 men charged will now stand trial. For live gavel-to-gavel coverage of the trial, subscribe to Law and Crime on YouTubeTV today. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. The defendants rest their cases in the death of Ahmaud Arbery trial out of Glenn County, Georgia. McMichael and his father, Gregory McMichael, along with neighbor William Roddy Bryan, are on trial in the death of 25-year-old Arbery. All 3 men face life in prison if convicted on charges of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. Arbery's death captured the nation's attention after a video of the February 2020 shooting went viral. Gregory and Travis McMichael tailed Arbery in a pickup truck as he went for a run near his home. He was unarmed at the time. Travis McMichael eventually shot and killed him, claiming self-defense and citizen's arrest. That has since been repealed and replaced. Bryan recorded the entire incident on video. On Thursday, cross-examination continued for Travis McMichael, who testified he believes Arbery was a threat, even though he did not pull out a weapon.
Hasn't said anything to you?
No, he has not said anything yet. No, ma'am.
Hasn't verbally threatened you?
Verbally, no.
Still running with his hands at his sides.
Directly towards me, yes, ma'am.
Hasn't pulled out a gun.
Hasn't seen a weapon yet, no, ma'am.
And hasn't shown you a weapon this entire time.
He has not.
Hasn't said a word the entire time.
Not one time.
All he's done is run away from you.
Run past me, yes, ma'am.
And you pulled out a shotgun and pointed it at him.
Running directly towards me, and this is now the second time on the road coming directly, and then watching how he interacted with the pickup truck in that general location when I pulled up first time, attacking the truck, and then seeing him interact with the vehicle on Burford, saying that the police are coming, him turning and running, on top of seeing Mr. Albenzi pointing, and the whole February 11th episode. I was under the impression, and I was, at this point, this guy can be a threat, and he is coming directly to me.
Following cross-examination, defense attorney Laura Hogue called for the admonishment of prosecutor Larissa Oliver after she asked witness Lindy Coffer, quote, "Do you believe that someone stealing is deserving of the death penalty?" Following Hogue's motion, defense attorney Kevin Goff called for a mistrial.
It's inappropriate, it's incendiary, it's prejudicial, it's improper, and we ask that she be sanctioned in front of the jury for having done that in any case, but in such a serious case.
We join that.
Your Honor, I'd join in that motion, and if I can have the lunch recess to confer with counsel without waiving the issue, I don't understand why we're not moving why there wasn't a motion for a mistrial. I don't know how you cure that, but given all the time that we've put into this trial, and I'm talking about everybody in the judicial system, before making that motion, if the court will allow me, I'd like to have the lunch break to confer. Maybe there's something I'm missing here, that's not the appropriate thing to ask for. But if I have to do it now or lose it, then I'm going to move for a mistrial.
Let's bring back criminal defense attorney Taylor Koss and Terry Austin. Taylor, we've heard long reports that Travis McMichael called Arbery a racial slur after the shooting, but the prosecution didn't get it in before arresting. What happened there?
Yeah, I'm quite frankly, I'm surprised that this testimony was not let in, especially when the individual who allegedly said it is on the witness stand. This goes directly to intent. What's the frame of mind of this individual? If he's using a racial slur, does this really fit into the alleged offense of self-defense? So I am quite frankly stunned. I understand the concept that, you can't, if you ask the question and he says, no, I did not say that, you're kind of stuck with the answer. But I still don't understand why he was prevented from asking a question. I think the jury should be able to hear this and evaluate the credibility of that statement. It goes directly to intent, it goes directly to the core of the defense, and I'm quite frankly stunned that it was not allowed in.
Yeah, it was interesting how that's being decided and wasn't really ruled on before they arrested. Terry, after a motion by the defense, Judge Wamsey ruled to admonish the prosecutor for a controversial question about the death penalty. Do you think that was the right call?
Oh, it definitely was the right call. In fact, I was very surprised to hear Larissa Allred say that question. It was just a witness who was a neighbor, and she asked, have you ever been the subject of a crime? And then the very next question was, do you think someone stealing should get the death penalty? It was offensive, and I think Laura Hogue made the right motion. I don't think it should have been a motion, as we know already, that Kevin Goff did for a mistrial. The judge did the right thing. He said it was not necessary, it was irrelevant, and so he admonished her in front of the jury, and that was the right solution.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the jury interprets that admonishing of a prosecutor in front of them. Agreed, not the right place or the question to ask. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, Alec Baldwin slammed with another lawsuit. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. Two men convicted for the assassination of famed civil rights leader Malcolm X are exonerated for the crime more than half a century later. Muhammad Aziz and Khalil Islam were convicted in the 1965 shooting death of Malcolm X. At the time of the assassination, Malcolm X was delivering a speech in New York City. His pregnant wife and daughters were in attendance. A year later, Aziz and Islam were sentenced to life in prison along with Muhammad Jahid Abdul Halim. Halim confessed to the murder during the trial and admitted neither Aziz or Islam were part of the scheme. Both men always maintained their innocence. Aziz, now 83 years old, was released from prison in 1985. Islam was released in 1987. He died in 2009 at the age of 74. After a 2 years long reinvestigation into the case, both men were exonerated for the crime on Thursday. Here to discuss this exoneration, decades in the making, is criminal defense attorney Taylor Koss and co-host Terry Austin. Taylor, as a former Brooklyn DA who ran the Conviction Integrity Unit, what are your thoughts on an exoneration after a 2-year-long investigation?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is that it's good to know, to be reinforced, the concept that justice does not have time limits, that no matter what, that as long as there are people, good people, working in conviction review units, conviction integrity units at different prosecutors' offices across the country, that things like this can happen. And the good thing about these types of investigations are that the prosecutors work in tandem with the attorneys for the alleged wrongfully convicted. And that way, there's a give and take. There's a sharing of evidence. And this is how justice happens. There's not one side withholding from the other, trying to get an edge up. When you're working together and really your only goal is the truth, great things like this can happen. And so it's a great day.
Exactly. Now, Terry, does this exoneration and the reasons for it create a civil claim for Aziz or Islam's estate against the state or FBI?
You know what, Brian? You are reading my mind. A wrongfully convicted individual has two options. They can sue under the state's exoneration statute, but there's a limit there. It's capped, the number of years multiplied by a certain amount of money. But they can also sue under the Constitution, basically, if they were deprived of some sort of due process. And if that happens, then there is an unlimited amount of money that they can actually receive in that type of case. And I think they do have some constitutional claims here, some due process claims where they can make and make some damages here.
It's interesting. Of course, we'll follow that case if that civil case does in fact come up. But right now, these men are exonerated, one posthumously, one still alive. Like you said, Taylor, good day for all. When we come back, the latest in a long list of lawsuits against actors and producers of the ill-fated movie Rust. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. Famed attorney Gloria Allred announces another lawsuit against actor Alec Baldwin, accusing him of playing Russian roulette on the film set of Rust. As Law and Crime Daily first reported last month, Alec Baldwin was rehearsing on the set when he fired a gun loaded with a live round. Cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot and killed, and director Joel Souza was injured. The movie's script supervisor, Mamie Mitchell, is the latest to file a lawsuit against the actors and producers, claiming emotional distress and deliberate infliction of harm. Mitchell was the first one to call 911 after the shooting. In a press conference on Wednesday, Allred announced she would represent Mitchell and said Baldwin ignored safety protocols and played Russian roulette by firing the gun without checking it or having an armor check it. Taylor, Mitchell was a witness to the tragic death. She did not physically get harmed. How does a claim like this work?
Yeah, with all deference to Gloria Allred and her very long and successful career, only she could do this, right? She could take this tragedy, because that's what it is, and hijack it for monetary gain for a party that literally had nothing to do with the incident. I understand she was present. I understand she called 911. She wasn't injured. She wasn't one of the two parties who unfortunately lost their life or was, seriously injured. It was just someone who was essentially watching. And if that's what we're doing now, if we are taking people who just happen to be around when bad things happen and suing for great big deals, Alec Baldwin's huge pocket. If that's what we're doing, well, there's no big surprise that there are thousands and thousands of jokes at lawyers' expenses.
I hear you with the jokes at our expenses, definitely. Terry, there are now over 100 lawsuits that have been filed in connection with this one event. Do you think this could amount to a class action?
Brian, it could. If there are dozens and dozens of people who are suing, the class action would have to be certified and it would have to be clearly defined. And you'd have to have the same harm and you'd have to have the same defendants. So it's really going to be a question of whether or not the same laws, the same facts. And I think here we do have that if these individuals are all harmed in the same way. And it really will save on resources as far as multiple trials might be concerned. You want to make sure that the state is saving resources and not having multiple lawsuits for something that really could all be tried together. So we'll see what happens. But if the numbers continue to rise, I think that is something that they're going to have to consider to keep the expenses down.
Hey, maybe we'll see that Gloria Allred is representing this class action suit, as Taylor may have been suggesting about her picking up more cases. Well, thank you both. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.